The possession isn't like the movies, you know, with demons where it's all like it's very much a I am tired, so live my life for me until I feel better. Today we are continuing on with my Across the Veil Field Guide series, talking about energy being familiars versus animal guides. I make these sort of versus type of videos just because sometimes I think maybe people can get confused and clump them together when in reality they're very distinctive and they're very different. Just in case you guys watch these out of order, I will be going over just a few foundational concepts to help set up what I'm about to talk about. Different entities live within different dimensional planes. There are 15 dimensions, and anything below dimension 13 has room to be morally gray and may have to consume the energy of other beings in order to sustain themselves. Except for human ghosts, though sometimes when they do consume the energy of the living, it's to make themselves feel just a little bit better, but it's not necessary. Seeing and experiencing anything across the veil very much depends on your openness and the current mindsets that you hold. What I'll be describing is based off my experiences and the stories I've heard both inside and outside spiritual circles. So let's get into it. What is an energy being familiar? So these entities, I first came into contact with them when I was actually a sophomore in high school, before I even knew that I was a medium. And I probably wouldn't know that they exist unless I had these run-ins with them. They're essentially servants that are created from extreme human emotions. Now I know that sounds kind of weird, but let me break it down for you. It is super weird. It doesn't just sound weird, it is weird. So I need to explain. So basically they're siphons that are attached to you 24/7, and they have some sort of frequency match with you. I talk about frequency matches a little bit in the other videos too. A frequency match is when an entity finds something in your field that it can be drawn to, and in some cases attached to. That can be societal fears, general fears, phobias, trauma, anxiety, depression, addiction, stuff like that. And so usually when energy being familiars are created from a certain emotion, whether it was a traumatic event that caused extreme sadness or extreme anger and the person just felt really alone, or whatever the case may be, or I even heard of someone who had an extreme addiction to a substance, just felt very isolated and alone, and so these entities were created from those things. Let me be clear though, it's usually a very conscious thing. For instance, if a person is a spiritual practitioner, they're usually very aware of what they're doing. I mean, just because you had a mental breakdown the other day does not mean that all of a sudden there's just this entity running around your house. That's not what I'm saying. It can be kind of complicated when explaining it, but basically it's a very conscious thing. There's a couple of steps involved. There's the extreme emotion, there's the sense of loneliness and isolation, and then the third very important step is the fact that the person sets the intention that they need support from something outside of themselves. And so once these entities are created, it is a deal. They are attached to you 24/7. They will do stuff for you in exchange for a certain amount of energy. They can jump from person to person, but if they go too long without a host, they will die. And so in regards to where they fall dimensionally, as high as dimension 7, which, as I said at the beginning of the video, there are 15 dimensions. So 7 is pretty high, but I will say that they can never ever be as powerful as, say, a deity or an archangel or an archangel. One day I will make a map with these tiers that shows where all of the entities fall. But again, it really just is a range. It's not like demons are always here and EBFs are always here. It's like, it's a scale sometimes. I'd also like to make a distinction between energy being familiars and the sort of traditional folklore idea of familiars. That's why I call them energy being familiars, is that they don't have a form. They are literally in the spirit realm, just kind of floating around until they find a host, and they literally they cling on to parts of their body. It sounds weird, but yeah, if you have psychic vision, you will see these things literally attached to people as if they're leeches. In my previous video about tricksters and copycats, I mentioned EBFs, And so just in case you guys didn't watch that video, I'll go ahead and explain briefly what I said there. Basically, I described the form of them. So EBFs are very sort of cloudy, kind of ghostly is the best way that I can describe it, because their forms aren't very solid. Even when I sense them intuitively, they're just not so solidly there as some other types of entities are. They have the capability of being floaters, like I said. Usually they like to stay attached to the same host for a while because that's a secure food source for them. But they can, and they do, float around, even temporarily, especially if the host wants them to do something for them, or if they want them to investigate or look at something. Usually it's for spying or protective purposes. They can shapeshift, kind of, and change their form depending on the amount of energy the host allows them to siphon off of them. The longer that these energy being familiars can stay attached to the same host, I have seen literally personal cases with friends where it evolves. They start as one form that's pretty small, and then they can change their appearance and then just get bigger and bigger and bigger, like physically. Not physically, but like, you know what I mean, just in size. And of course, it's very, very draining for the host. But the thing is that, like I said, these things are born from really dark emotions. These people were in very dark places. And so I'm going to enter this next section with caution. I just want to say up front before I even get into it that I am not a medical professional. I am not a doctor. I used to be a psych major before I changed my major to fashion, but that doesn't matter. What I am about to say, seriously, what I am about to say is based off of my opinion and my experiences. I have had 3 friends, close friends from years ago, that worked with energy being familiars. And so with that much exposure, I really got the sense for how they work. Having an energy being familiar attached to you can almost be comparable to, in some ways, dissociative identity disorder. But here's the difference. So with dissociative identity disorder, that is a psychological condition where someone has multiple personalities, multiple personas in their mind in the same body. And in very severe cases, that person can go years not know what happened. They have no recollection of that time gap. That sounds very scary. And so in other words, these people are totally unaware of their alter personalities. But with energy being familiars, the host is perfectly aware of these. And of course, the fact that energy being familiars foster a spiritual experience. DID and energy being familiars are not the same. I am simply pointing out the similarities that I see in order to foster a better understanding of how energy being familiars work. And so with that said, energy being familiars are literally attached to the person and they can take over their bodies with permission. I would say that this is the most solidified and common form of possession because, of course, in the movies and stuff, you see these horrible, scary scenes of demons taking over people and stuff like that. That is way less common than this. With a demon, there's so many hoops, like there's so many things that have to happen in order for them to even get close to possessing you. With an energy being familiar, it's almost like this comfort, especially if that particular one is one that the person created, the host created it. And so there could be this sense of care and attachment, and of course the fact that being in the dark place that the host was in, creating it, they are receiving emotional support from this thing. It allows the energy being familiar to have all sorts of permissions and privileges and access to this person's energy because of that. The possession isn't like the movies, you know, with demons where it's all like It's very much a, it's like, I am tired, so live my life for me until I feel better. And that sounds wild, but it's true. I've seen it. I've had 3 friends that have had these. And so, I mean, if anything, it's just sad because, again, these hosts are usually going through something very serious and they need support. And so when they just cannot one day, you know, they just can't. They can't get out of bed, they can't go to work, something like that. These EBFs take over them and walk around as them, even though it's not them. And I don't know how much I can say because, I mean, obviously I would never say any names, but just to give you some examples, the friends that I used to have years ago, there was a time where we were going to a summer school class together, and this person picked me up in their car every day to take me to the high school that we were taking the class at. And there were a couple days where I noticed that they were acting off. Because I knew about EBFs already, I straight up asked, hey, are you actually so-and-so? And they said, yeah. And so my friend, just to paint the picture better, was totally checked out. This EBF was possessing their body and walking around as them. Just remembering it is, that feels like so long ago. I mean, thank God.
That was a lot to deal with.
Eventually, to my knowledge, the two friends that had the EBFs, those EBFs left them, but there is this one friend who I'm still friends with today who has two EBFs. I've talked to them before, they're fine, but again, they're siphons, and obviously no disrespect to my friend. But it's just worrisome because, again, the nature of siphons is to feed off of your energy, and it makes you feel gross and bad and weighed down. Even if it seemingly helps you for a little while, it's just not good for you at all in the long run. And so moving on to animal guides. I refer to the traditional folklore sense of familiars as animal guides because they are not siphons. They are most likely ancestral guides that have stayed within your family's lineage for a long time. And usually it's in the form of an animal that's especially symbolic for you guys. They help you with things, and they are actually aligned to eternal living God source, which God, gathering of divine, or gathering of deities, the universe, the highest and deepest love possible, whatever form of divinity you believe in. And so there's never any yucky deals or siphoning. Sometimes people like to make offerings to them, and it's just a nice gesture. They don't require that. They're genuinely here to help, and they're here to gently guide you along your path, but they probably won't be as present as a deity or god would be. They're just kind of there when you need them and when you need a little bit of a push. They give you signs and direction, and it can be pretty sporadic. Usually it's only every now and then. Unless you're pagan, unless you are a spiritual practitioner and you actually hone that connection to have them help you in rituals, just like in the traditional sense. And so for me, I do have an animal guide, and I'm going to tell the story. Before I was born, there was this neighborhood cat, and when she was going to have kittens, my mom kindly kind of set up a nice little cardboard box bed for her. She had a litter with all gray tabbies, and they were all girls except for the one orange one, and that was my sweet Charlie. Charlie was the only boy cat in the whole litter, and like I said, the only orange one. And so when my mom started giving away the kittens, nobody wanted him because I guess, I don't know, boy kittens get a bad rep because they spray everywhere and sometimes they tear stuff up a lot. But my mom found him adorable, so she took him in. When she became pregnant with me, Charlie spent so much time with her. Like a lot of time. It's so cute because she told me he'd curl himself around her belly and just stay there. Once I was born, he kept getting into my crib and it kind of made my parents nervous. So they closed the door on him one time. And it's crazy because he literally sat out there, pawed at the door, looked at them, pawed at the door, looked at them, like he knew exactly what he was doing. He spent a lot of time with me. We spent a lot of time together. He was my best friend. I was very spiritual as a kid too, and so I felt connected with him. What's wild is that I knew when he would pass, even though my parents didn't tell me. And so I remember just waking up that day and I had to go to school, but I didn't want to because I knew what would happen intuitively. Unfortunately, at this point, years went by and Charlie was old and he had some health issues. I literally held him crying before going to school, and then of course when I got home, he was gone. I mourned him for a long time, and then what's interesting is that years later when I started on my spiritual journey, I started having experiences as I started to discover my mediumship. Just little subtle signs that he was there, a lot of dreams, vivid dreams. And what's so cool is that my spiritual friends who are seers actually saw him in my house on various occasions. They would hear him meowing, they would see him, they would get the sense that something was there, so they would reach back to pet something, but then nothing was there. A whole bunch of stories. It was so cool to hear about. And so as a pagan, I honed this connection, and now we work together. But I want to tell you about the most wild experience I've ever had with Charlie. So I think maybe it was about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, I had my friend over and we were in the process of getting closer. And so she was over at my house one night and we were having these spiritual talks. All of a sudden, while I was telling a story to her about one of the experiences I had, she starts tearing up. And so I thought, oh no, did I say something sad? Did I say something weird? What's going on? Because I thought she was crying, but in reality, she literally stops and looks at me and says, oh geez, it seems like I'm having an allergic reaction or something. And then she asks, do you have a cat? And I said, yes, I do. But he's in the spirit realm. She literally had an allergic reaction to my spirit cat. So I love that story. Her and I bring it up all the time because it's just so amazing. And so basically, in summary, Charlie started off as the more traditional idea of a familiar, and then once he passed away, he became my animal guide on the other side. And so that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, found it helpful, please go ahead and give it a like. I don't know what I'm doing with my hands. Wishing you a great rest of your day, and I'll see you soon.